The war had dragged on for 12 relentless years, carving scars across the galaxy and across every human who had survived it. Entire systems had burned, civilizations had collapsed, and yet, somehow, humanity endured. Not alone, but alongside the powerful Velkari coalition, a union of species that had once sworn to stand together against extinction. Above the blue-white world of Astra Prime, the final battle was unfolding. Commander Elias Varn stood at the center of the command deck aboard the flagship Resolute Dawn, his posture steady despite the tension tightening every nerve in his body. Around him, holographic displays pulsed with streams of data, enemy formations, shield levels, casualty projections. The bridge hummed with controlled urgency, every officer focused, every movement precise. "We're holding the line," Lieutenant Mara said, her voice carrying a fragile thread of hope. "Coalition forces are advancing on the enemy flank. Another push and we might actually win this." Wind. It was a word no one had dared to believe in for years. Elias allowed himself a brief glance toward the observation viewport. Beyond the reinforced glass, space was alive with fire. Human and Velkari ships moved in perfect synchronization, weaving through enemy formations with practiced efficiency. Explosions bloomed like distant stars, brief and violent. For the first time in a long time, the chaos felt controlled. "Predictable. Maintain formation," Elias ordered calmly. "We don't break now, not when we're this close." "Aye, Commander." Across the deck, tension eased just slightly. A few officers exchanged glances, quiet relief flickering in their eyes. They had all lost too much. Too many friends, too many worlds. This battle was supposed to end it. Then something changed. It started small, so subtle that most didn't notice at first. A shift in the coalition fleet's formation. Velkari warships began to reposition, their elegant, blade-like hulls drifting into new alignments. At first, it looked tactical. Elias frowned. "Lieutenant, why are coalition ships pulling back from the forward assault line?" Mara's fingers moved quickly across her console. "Running analysis. Maybe they're repositioning for a coordinated strike." "Without notifying us?" Elias asked quietly. That wasn't how the coalition operated, not in 12 years of war. A flicker of unease spread across the bridge. Then the targeting alerts lit up. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Every screen flared red. "Commander," Mara's voice faltered, "I'm detecting weapon locks." "From where?" Elias demanded. She hesitated. "From the coalition fleet." Silence slammed into the room. For a single heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. "That's not possible," someone whispered. Elias didn't speak. His eyes locked onto the tactical display as confirmation after confirmation poured in. Velkari ships, every one of them, had shifted targeting solutions. Not toward the enemy. Toward the human fleet. "Open channel," Elias said, his voice suddenly colder than space itself. "Priority command frequency, now." The comms officer obeyed instantly. "Channel open." "This is Commander Elias Varn of the Resolute Dawn," he said, every word sharp and controlled. "Coalition command, you are targeting Allied vessels. Confirm malfunction." There was no response. Only static. Then, "They're charging weapons," Mara shouted. The first shot came without warning. A beam of searing plasma tore across space, striking a human cruiser at the edge of formation. The ship didn't even have time to react. Its shields collapsed instantly, its hull splitting apart in a violent cascade of fire and debris. The bridge erupted into chaos. "They're firing on us." "Shields up." "Evasive maneuvers." "Return fire." "No," Elias snapped. The word cut through the panic like a blade. "Hold fire," he ordered, his voice deadly calm. "All ships hold fire." "But, sir, if this is a mistake, we don't escalate it," Elias said. "Not yet." Another volley struck. And another. Human ships began to fall, one after another, caught completely off guard. Formation collapsed into disorder as vessels scattered, trying to understand what was happening. But there was no misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. Elias saw it in the precision, in the coordination, in the way coalition ships anticipated every human movement before it happened. This had been planned. Commander, Mara's voice broke slightly. They're not responding to any hails, it's like we were never allies, Elias finished quietly. The realization settled over him like ice. 12 years of trust. Gone in a single moment. Sir, we can't keep holding, a tactical officer shouted. We're being wiped out. Elias closed his eyes for just a fraction of a second. Then he made his decision. All ships, he said, his voice steady once more. Defensive retreat pattern, protect civilian carriers, do not pursue, do not engage unless fired upon. A bitter irony. They were already being fired upon. Explosions rocked the Resolute Dawn as a nearby detonation sent shockwaves through its hull. Lights flickered, consoles sparked. Shields at 60% and dropping. Engine output fluctuating. Elias gripped the edge of the command console, steadying himself as the ship shuddered again. He looked out at the battlefield one last time. At the ships burning. At the allies who had become executioners. And something inside him changed. Not fear. Not rage. Something colder. Lieutenant Mara, he said quietly. Yes, Commander. Prepare a long-range encrypted transmission. Full battle logs, all sensor data, everything. Her eyes widened. Sir, if we do that. They won't be able to erase this, Elias said, no matter what happens next. Understanding dawned in her expression. She nodded, transmission ready. Another explosion ripped through the ship, closer this time. The deck tilted violently as alarms screamed. Hull breach on lower levels. We're losing containment. Elias didn't look away from the stars. Send it. Mara hesitated only a second. Then she pressed the command. Transmission away. Far beyond the battlefield, beyond coalition space, beyond everything they had ever known, the signal vanished into the void, silent, invisible, unstoppable. A record. A warning. A promise. The Resolute Dawn groaned as its structure began to fail, systems collapsing one by one. Commander, Mara whispered. Elias finally turned toward his crew. Toward the people who had trusted him. Who had believed in something bigger. He gave a single, small nod. No speeches. No false hope. Just acceptance. The lights went out, and the flagship of humanity disappeared into fire. Across the battlefield, the last human ships fell. One by one. Until there was nothing left. No resistance. No survivors. Only silence. And from the perspective of the galaxy, humanity ended that day. But drifting silently through the endless dark, carrying the truth no one was meant to hear. That single transmission continued its journey. Unseen. Unstoppable. Waiting. And somewhere far beyond the edge of known space, something was listening. 20 years turned war into myth. Across coalition-controlled space, the official history was clean, simple, and repeated until no one questioned it. Humanity had become unstable, dangerous, too unpredictable to survive. Their destruction had been necessary. Most believed it. Those who didn't learned quickly to stay silent. Far beyond the busy trade lanes and fortified systems, there existed a region no one willingly entered. A drifting ocean of broken metal and dead signals known as Orion Graveyard. It was where the last human fleets had fallen, where entire armadas had been reduced to frozen debris, locked in an eternal moment of destruction. Ships didn't go there, not unless they were desperate. Or foolish. The scavenger vessel Kestrel's luck was a bit of both. Radiation levels are stable, the pilot muttered, eyes scanning the dim-lit cockpit. We're clear to push deeper. Deeper, another crew member scoffed. We're already inside a grave. Exactly, the pilot replied. Graves have valuables. The ship drifted past the shattered remains of a massive human cruiser, its hull torn open like a wound that never healed. Frozen fragments floated around it, pieces of armor, broken weapon arrays, even the faint silhouette of an escape pod that never made it far. Hard to believe this was the final battlefield, the navigator said quietly. No distress calls, no survivors, just silence. That's what happens when a species loses, the pilot answered flatly. Then something flickered on the console. A soft, almost imperceptible pulse. Hold on, the navigator said, leaning closer. I'm picking up a signal. The pilot frowned. From what? Everything out here is dead. That's what I thought, the navigator replied, confusion creeping into his voice. But this is structured, repeating. It's not random interference. The signal pulsed again. Clearer this time. Deliberate. Alive. A chill settled over the cockpit. Trace it, the pilot ordered. I'm trying, the navigator said, fingers moving quickly. It's coming from deeper inside the debris field. There's a large mass, maybe a capital ship. Human. Has to be. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. No one said anything about active systems out here, one of them whispered. No one comes out here to report it, the pilot shot back. We might have just found the biggest untouched cache in the sector. Greed pushed aside caution. Bring us closer, he ordered. The Kestrel's luck eased forward, weaving through the wreckage. As they approached, the silhouette of something massive emerged from the darkness. A broken human dreadnought, its structure half buried beneath layers of debris. Look at that, the navigator breathed. That thing must have been a flagship. Still could be, the pilot muttered, if there's anything left inside. The signal surged. Every screen on the ship flickered violently. Wait, what's happening? One crew member shouted. I didn't do that, the navigator said, panic rising. The ship's systems began to override one another, controls locking up as if something had reached inside and taken hold. Shut it down, the pilot yelled. Cut all connections. I can't, the navigator replied. We're being. The screens went black. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound. No light. Then slowly, the displays came back online. But they weren't showing ship systems anymore. Every screen displayed the same message. Two simple words. We remember. Silence filled the cockpit. What is this? Someone whispered. Before anyone could respond, new data flooded the system. Coordinates, encrypted signals, complex streams of information far beyond anything the scavengers understood. It's inside our navigation, the pilot shouted. It's rewriting our course. To where? No answer came. Because deep beneath the wreckage, inside the broken shell of that ancient dreadnought, something had awakened. Lights flickered to life in long-dead corridors. Power surged through dormant systems. Machines that had waited in absolute silence for 20 years began to move again. And at the center of it all, in a chamber hidden beyond every known scan, Commander Elias Varn opened his eyes. He didn't gasp. He didn't panic. He simply breathed in slowly, as if waking from a long, controlled sleep. The chamber around him hummed with quiet energy. Frost evaporated from surfaces. Interfaces flickered to life one by one. Status, he said, his voice calm, unchanged. A figure stepped forward from the shadows. Lieutenant Mara. Older now, sharper. Her expression no longer carried the uncertainty it once had. Reconstruction phase complete, she said. Primary systems online, fleet activation at 12% and rising. Ilya sat up slowly, his gaze steady. How long? 20 years, Myra replied. A brief silence followed. Not shock. Not grief. Just acknowledgement. And the transmission, he asked. Myra's eyes met his. It survived. That was all he needed to hear. Around them, deep within the graveyard, something impossible began to unfold. Hidden shipyards activated. Fabrication lines ignited. Silent vessels, unseen, undetected, powered on for the first time. A fleet. Not rebuilt. Reimagined. We stayed hidden, Mara continued. We learned, we adapted, everything they used against us we improved. Ilya stood, stepping toward the observation viewport. Outside, the graveyard no longer looked dead. It looked waiting. They think we're gone, Myra said quietly. Helios watched as distant lights flickered into existence. Ships awakening, systems linking, a network forming in the shadows of history. Good, he replied. His reflection stared back at him, no longer the man who had trusted allies, who had believed in unity. Something colder stood in his place. Let them keep believing that, he said. Behind him, alarms began to sound, not warnings but signals of activation. The fleet was coming alive. And far beyond the graveyard, the stolen coordinates from the scavenger ship began to propagate through hidden channels, reaching places no one expected. The first step had already begun. Helios turned back to Mara. Prepare the fleet, he said. For what, she asked. He paused for only a moment, then answered, for the moment they realize. His eyes hardened. We never disappeared. Far away, in a quiet system at the edge of Coalition space, a listening station suddenly went dark. No warning. No distress signal. Just silence. And this time, it wasn't the kind that meant something was dead. It was the kind that meant something was hunting. The first sign that something was wrong didn't come with explosions. It came with silence. On the outer edge of Coalition territory, the mining world of Karen IX was routine, predictable, and, most importantly, secure. It was a lifeline for the Velkari war machine, rich in rare elements that powered their fleets and fortified their dominance. Nothing ever happened there. Until everything stopped. No signal from surface control, the station overseer reported, confusion evident in his tone. Comms are completely offline. That's impossible, the system commander replied sharply. Run diagnostics. Already did. No interference, no damage. It's like they just went quiet. Within minutes, long-range scanners were redirected. Surveillance drones were deployed. Emergency protocols activated. Still nothing. No distress call. No weapon discharge. No indication of attack. Just absence. Dispatch a reconnaissance fleet, the commander ordered. Now. Hours later, a small Velkari task force dropped out of warp near Karen IX, weapons primed and sensors sweeping aggressively. What they found made no sense. The planet was intact. Orbiting platforms were still in place. Defense grids remained active. Surface structures showed no signs of damage. Confirm visual, the lead pilot said slowly. I'm seeing it, another replied. Everything's still here. Then why isn't anyone responding? They moved closer. Closer. Until the first anomaly appeared. All ships halt, the commander ordered suddenly. What is it? Power readings, he said, his voice tightening. They're wrong. The energy output from the planet didn't match normal operations. It was reduced, controlled, as if something had deliberately stripped away excess systems, leaving only a skeletal framework behind. Scan for life signs. A pause. Then, negative. The word echoed through every ship. No biological activity detected, the sensor officer confirmed. Not a single living being. That's not possible, someone whispered. Karen IX had housed over 3 million workers, engineers, and military personnel. They hadn't just disappeared. They had been removed. Prepare landing teams, the commander ordered, though uncertainty crept into his tone. We need eyes on the ground. Dropships descended through the atmosphere, cutting through thin clouds until the sprawling mining complexes came into view. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Machinery sat idle, transport lines frozen mid-operation, lights still glowing faintly in empty corridors. Touchdown, the pilot announced. The team stepped out cautiously, weapons raised, senses on edge. Stay sharp, the squad leader said. Something's not right. They moved through the facility, boots echoing against metal floors. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Just absence. A chair overturned here, a dropped tool there, small details that hinted at interruption, but not violence. It's like they were here 1 second, a soldier muttered. And gone the next, another finished. Then they reached the central command chamber. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, and everything changed. At the center of the room, burned into the floor itself, was a massive symbol. A fractured earth. Jagged. Broken. Deliberate. "What is that?" one of the soldiers whispered. Before anyone could answer, the systems around them flickered to life. Screens activated simultaneously, displaying streams of data, alien code, unfamiliar structures, impossible complexity. "We're being scanned," the tech specialist said, panic rising. "No, not scanned, read." A voice suddenly echoed through the chamber. "Calm. Cold. Unmistakably human. You took everything from us." The soldiers froze. "Now we understand," the voice continued, "what that feels like." "Who is this?" the squad leader demanded, stepping forward. "Identify yourself." No answer. Only silence. Then the screens went dark again. Back in orbit, alarms erupted across the Velkari fleet. "Commander," a pilot shouted, "we're losing system control." "What do you mean losing?" Before he could finish, navigation systems failed, weapon targeting glitched, communication channels scrambled beyond recognition. "It's spreading," another officer yelled. "Whatever's on the planet, it's in our ships." Panic surged. "Cut all links to the surface," the commander ordered. Trying, it's not responding. One by one, ships began to lose functionality, drifting helplessly as their systems were overwritten by something they couldn't fight. Something they couldn't even understand. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Systems stabilized. Controls returned. But it was too late. "Commander," the sensor officer said slowly. "What now?" The officer hesitated. "Everything of value is gone." "Explain." "Resource reserves depleted, data archives wiped, energy cores stripped, even secondary backups gone." The commander stared at the readings, disbelief turning into something darker. "They didn't destroy the planet," he said quietly. "No, sir. They took it." Far beyond the system, hidden within the darkness between stars, Elias Varn watched the operation's conclusion. A holographic projection of Karan IX rotated slowly before him, now marked as secured. "Efficient," Myra said, arms crossed as she reviewed the data. "Minimal resistance, full extraction." Elias nodded slightly. "Any survivors?" she asked. A pause. "Relocated," he replied. Myra studied him for a moment, but didn't press further. "This will cause panic," she said instead. "They've never seen anything like this." "That's the point," Elias answered. He stepped closer to the display, his gaze fixed on the fractured Earth symbol now embedded into the planet's surface. "They thought destruction was power," he said quietly. "We're showing them something worse." Mara tilted her head slightly. "Which is?" Elias turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Control." Across Coalition space, alerts began to spread. A system lost. Then another signal gone. Then another's. Not explosions. Not battles. Disappearances. Something was moving through their territory, unseen, unstoppable, and methodical. And for the first time in decades, the Velkari coalition felt something they had long forgotten. Fear, because the war they thought they had ended had just begun again. And this time, humanity wasn't fighting to survive. They were fighting to take everything back. Fear spread faster than any fleet ever could. After the loss of Karan IX, the Velkari coalition did what it had always done best: control the narrative. Official broadcasts flooded every system within hours. A localized systems failure, they claimed. A contained incident. No external threat detected. But this time, the galaxy didn't believe them. Because something else had already begun to move. It started quietly. A glitch in a trade network, a flicker across a civilian broadcast channel, a momentary distortion in a diplomatic transmission. Small, almost invisible disruptions, easy to ignore. Until they were. On a neutral world far from coalition control, a public information hub suddenly froze mid-broadcast. Citizens paused, confused, as the image distorted into static. Then it changed. The screen filled with raw footage. Unfiltered. Unedited. A battlefield above Astra Prime. Human ships flying in formation beside Valkyrie vessels. Then, the shift. The targeting locks. The first shot. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the footage continued, showing the betrayal in horrifying clarity. Human ships, unprepared, being torn apart by the very allies they had trusted for over a decade. "No," someone whispered. "It's fake," another insisted, but the doubt in their voice betrayed them. Then came the audio. Elias Varn's voice, calm, controlled, unmistakably real. "This is Commander Elias Varn of the Resolute Dawn, Coalition Command. Confirm malfunction." Silence followed, then the sound of weapons firing. The broadcast cut. But it didn't end. Across dozens of systems, the same thing happened. Screens hijacked, signals overridden, the same footage, the same truth, spreading like a virus through every network it could reach. And this time, the Coalition couldn't stop it. "Shut it down," a Valkyrie High Counselor shouted, slamming his clawed hand against the console. "Block every unauthorized transmission." "We're trying," a technician replied, panic rising. "It's not centralized, it's everywhere. It's jumping systems faster than we can contain it." "That's impossible." "It shouldn't be," the technician admitted, "but it is. Because this wasn't just a broadcast. It was a weapon." Far away, hidden within a dark sector beyond Coalition detection grids, Elias stood before a massive data array. Streams of information flowed around him. Every transmission, every reaction, every system receiving the truth. Mara approached quietly, watching as entire regions lit up in response. "They're seeing it," she said. Elias didn't look away. "They're remembering," he corrected. Back in Coalition space, the consequences hit hard and fast. "Allied systems are requesting clarification," an officer reported. "Some are demanding independent investigations." "Deny them," the High Counselor snapped. "We tried. They're threatening to withdraw support." Another voice cut in. "Several border worlds have already severed communication with us." The room fell into tense silence. For the first time in decades, the Coalition wasn't facing an external enemy. It was facing doubt. And doubt was far more dangerous. "They're turning the galaxy against us," one council member said quietly. "No," another replied, his tone grim. "They're showing the galaxy who we really are." Across civilian channels, conversations erupted. They betrayed them. After fighting together for years. What else are they hiding? Trust, once the Coalition's greatest strength, began to fracture. Meanwhile, the broadcasts evolved. New footage surfaced. Human colonies burning. Civilian evacuation ships targeted. Encrypted logs revealing strategic decisions. Cold, calculated choices to sacrifice humanity in exchange for political advantage. Every piece of truth cut deeper than the last. "This wasn't war," Mara said softly, watching the reactions unfold. "It was execution." Elias finally turned away from the data stream. "Yes," he said, "and now everyone knows it." She studied him carefully. "This changes everything." "Exactly." "Coalition fleets will hesitate now," she continued. "Their allies won't trust them, their command structure." "Will collapse," Elias finished. But there was no satisfaction in his voice. Only focus. Because this wasn't the end of the plan. It was only the beginning. "Prepare phase 2, he said. Mara frowned slightly. "We're already destabilizing them if we push too fast." "They'll recover," Elias interrupted, "and we don't give them that chance." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Understood." Back in Coalition space, the High Council convened in emergency session. Holographic projections of key systems flickered around them, some stable, others flashing warning signals. "We must respond," one counselor insisted. "This cannot go unanswered." "With what?" another snapped. Our fleets are spread thin, our allies are questioning us, and we don't even know where they are. They're ghosts, someone whispered. No, the High Counselor said slowly, his voice heavy with realization. Ghosts don't do this. He looked around the chamber, meeting each of their eyes in turn. This is strategy. This is planning. This is war. And for the first time since humanity's fall, the Valkyrie coalition understood something they had never considered. They hadn't ended their enemy. They had created something worse. Far away, Helios stood before a new tactical display. Multiple coalition systems flickered across it, vulnerabilities exposed, defenses weakened, trust eroded. Mara stepped beside him. They're unraveling, she said. Helios nodded. Good, he replied quietly. But we're not done. His gaze hardened as he selected the next target. Because while the galaxy was still processing the truth, humanity was already moving forward. Faster, deeper, closer, and this time, they weren't just taking systems. They were taking control of the future itself. Somewhere in the vast expanse of coalition territory, a fleet began to mobilize, massive, heavily armed, prepared for total war. They were done reacting. Now they would strike back. But they didn't realize one critical mistake. The moment they chose to act was exactly the moment Helios had been waiting for. Because this next move wasn't theirs, the Valkyrie coalition didn't hesitate this time. After weeks of chaos, fractured alliances, and the steady psychological assault of truth spreading across their networks, they needed something decisive, something overwhelming. So they chose force. At the edge of a volatile binary system known as Helios Verge, long-range sensors detected what appeared to be a human fleet. Small, isolated, vulnerable. Too perfect. They've finally made a mistake, the Valkyrie High Commander declared, his voice echoing across the war chamber. All fleets converge, we end this here. Thousands of ships answered the call. War cruisers, carrier platforms, heavy artillery vessels, an armada so vast it blotted out starlight as it dropped from warp across Helios Verge. Their formation spread like a tightening noose, encircling the detected human presence with mathematical precision. At the center of it all, silence. Confirm target lock, the commander ordered. Confirmed, a tactical officer replied. Minimal movement from enemy fleet, no defensive formation. No defense, the commander frowned. Are they attempting to flee? No, sir, the officer said slowly. They're holding position. The massive coalition fleet continued to close in, weapons charging, shields reinforcing. Every ship aligned for a synchronized strike that would leave nothing behind. Still, no response, no signals, no movement. Just a handful of human vessels drifting near the gravitational tension between the twin stars. They know we're here, another officer said uneasily. Why aren't they reacting? Because they're cornered, the commander snapped. Prepare full barrage on my mark. Sir, something's off, the sensor chief interrupted. The commander's eyes narrowed. Explain. I'm reading inconsistencies in their energy signatures. It's like they're not fully there. What does that mean? I don't know, the sensor chief admitted, but it doesn't match any known configuration. A ripple of unease spread across the command deck. Proceed anyway, the commander ordered coldly. Fire. The moment the command was issued, everything went dark. Not visually, systemically. Across the entire coalition fleet, alarms exploded simultaneously. Command, we've lost targeting systems. Navigation is offline. Weapon arrays not responding. What is happening? Panic surged like wildfire. Stabilize systems, the commander roared. Switch to manual controls. We can't, an officer shouted. Every system is locked out. It's like something taken control. Across thousands of ships, the same nightmare unfolded. Screens flickered with cascading errors. Commands failed to execute. Entire vessels drifted helplessly as their control systems were overridden by an invisible force. Then, a voice, calm, measured, Everywhere. You taught us something valuable during the war. The commander froze. That voice, he whispered. On every screen, the same image appeared, a distorted silhouette standing against a backdrop of stars. Commander Elias Varn. How to disappear, Elias continued. The stars around Helios Verge seemed to shift. At first, it was barely noticeable, a flicker, a distortion in space itself. Then the illusion shattered. From the darkness between sensor readings, from the gaps in perception, from places where nothing should exist, human ships emerged. Dozens, hundreds, then thousands. Not warping in, not approaching, simply appearing. Their designs were unlike anything the Coalition had ever encountered, sleeker, more adaptive, almost fluid in structure. Energy signatures fluctuated unpredictably, making them impossible to lock onto. They were never here, the sensor chief breathed. They were hiding, Myra's voice echoed alongside Elia's, her tone sharper, colder. The trap snapped shut instantly. Human vessels moved with terrifying precision, striking disabled Coalition ships before they could recover. Weapon systems, advanced, silent, devastating, cut through shields as if they weren't there. Explosions rippled across the battlefield. But this wasn't chaos. It was control. Restore systems, the commander shouted desperately. Get us back online. Trying, came the reply, but every time we reboot, it shuts us down again. Ilya's voice returned, steady and unhurried. You relied on superiority, he said. Numbers, power, control. A pause. We relied on you. Understanding hit like a physical blow. Everything humanity was using, every tactic, every weakness they exploited, had been learned from the Coalition itself. Studied, refined, perfected. You made us better, Ilya said. Another wave of attacks tore through the fleet. And now, you're going to understand what that means. On the bridge of a hidden command vessel, Myra stood beside Elias, watching the battle unfold across a massive tactical display. They never had a chance, she said quietly. Elias didn't respond immediately. His eyes tracked the movement of every ship, every strike calculated down to the smallest detail. No, he said finally, they didn't. Below them, the once dominant Coalition fleet collapsed under the weight of its own helplessness. Ships collided. Others were systematically dismantled. Entire squadrons vanished before they could even regain control. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Human ships pulled back. Not in retreat. In completion. The battlefield fell into a strange, heavy silence. Scattered Coalition vessels drifted, damaged, powerless, barely functional. Alive, but broken. Why aren't they finishing us? One Velkari officer whispered, his voice shaking. The answer came immediately. Because this was never about destruction, Elias said, his voice echoing one last time across the crippled fleet. It was about understanding. The transmission cut, and the human fleet vanished again, slipping back into the unseen spaces between reality. Gone, as if they had never been there. On the shattered remnants of the Coalition flagship, the commander stared at the empty stars, his breathing uneven. They could have wiped us out, he muttered. No one replied, because they all understood the truth. This wasn't mercy. It was a message. Far away, within the hidden depths of human-controlled space, Mara turned to Elias. That was a risk, she said, letting them live. Elias' gaze remained fixed on the fatting battle data. They needed to see it, he replied. To feel it. Myra studied him for a moment. And now? Elias slowly closed the display. Now, he said quietly, they'll make their next move. A pause. And this time, his expression hardened. They'll be afraid. Across Coalition space, emergency signals began to spread. Reports of a catastrophic defeat, of an enemy that couldn't be seen, couldn't be tracked, couldn't be stopped. Panic followed, because the strongest military force in the galaxy had just been dismantled. without even understanding how. And deep in the void, unseen and unstoppable, humanity was already preparing for what came next. Victory echoed across the hidden human network, but it didn't sound like celebration. It sounded like silence. After the battle at Helios Verge, the fleet returned to the shadows in perfect formation, vanishing once more into the unseen corridors they had carved between stars. To the outside galaxy, it was as if they had never existed. But inside that hidden space, the cost became impossible to ignore. Damage reports are still coming in, Mara said, her voice lower than usual as she walked beside Elias through the command corridor. 17 ships lost, 32 heavily compromised, casualty lists are incomplete. Elias didn't respond. He kept walking. The corridor lights reflected off metallic walls that hummed with quiet energy, new, advanced, alive. Everything humanity had built in the last 20 years stood as proof of their evolution. And yet, it still wasn't enough. They entered the medical bay. The air was heavier here. Rows of wounded filled the chamber, some conscious, others suspended in stabilization pods. Medics moved quickly, silently, doing everything they could with technology that had been pushed beyond its limits. Mara slowed her steps. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she said quietly. Elias finally stopped. "War always happens," he replied. "That's not what I meant," she said, her tone tightening slightly. "We planned for this. We controlled every variable. We were supposed to be ahead." "We were," Elias said. "Then why did we lose them?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to one of the observation panels. Behind it, a young crew member lay motionless, surrounded by flickering diagnostic readouts. The systems tried to stabilize him, but the readings told a different story. "They adapted," Elias said finally, "faster than we expected." Mara crossed her arms, her gaze hardening. "Not fast enough to stop us." "No," Elias agreed. A pause, but fast enough to remind us what this costs. The silence between them stretched. For a moment, the war didn't feel like strategy or revenge. It felt real, heavy, unavoidable. Mara looked away first. "We can't afford hesitation," she said. "Not now, not when they're breaking." Elias turned toward her. "And what happens when they're gone?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. "What?" "When the coalition collapses," Elias continued. "When there's no one left to fight, what do we become then?" Mara frowned. "We survive," she said. Elias shook his head slightly. "That's not what we're doing anymore." She didn't like the way he said that. Before she could respond, an alert pulsed through the corridor, soft, controlled, but urgent. "Commander," a voice called through the comm, "you need to see this." Moments later, they stood inside the central command chamber. A massive holographic display dominated the room, showing a live map of coalition space. But it wasn't the tactical overlays that caught their attention. It was the fractures. Entire systems blinking independently, communication lines severed, fleets repositioning without coordination. "They're turning on each other," Mara said. "Not yet," Elias replied, "but they're close." A data stream expanded across the display, intercepted transmissions, political disputes, emergency sessions. Voices layered over one another, filled with accusation, fear, and uncertainty. "You lied to us. You hid the truth. We will not stand with you." The coalition wasn't just losing control. It was losing itself. Myra allowed a small breath of satisfaction. "It's working." Elias didn't share it. "Too well," he said. She looked at him sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means we're not the only ones watching this," he replied. He gestured toward the outer regions of the map, areas beyond coalition influence, beyond known alliances. "Power vacuums don't stay empty," he continued. "Something will move to fill it." Myra followed his gaze. Unknown sectors. Unmapped space. Quiet. Too quiet. "You think there's something out there?" she asked. Elias didn't answer directly. "I think the galaxy is bigger than the coalition ever admitted," he said. Before Mara could push further, another alert cut through the chamber, this one sharper, more urgent. "Commander, incoming transmission," the comm officer reported. "Priority override, it's from the Coalition." Mara's expression hardened instantly. "Put it through." The display shifted. A Velkari High Counselor appeared, his once commanding presence now strained, his posture rigid with tension. "Commander Elias Varn," he said, his voice controlled but edged with something unfamiliar. "Not arrogance. Not dominance. Fear. You've made your point," the counselor continued. "You've destabilized our systems, exposed our actions. This escalation serves no one." Mara scoffed quietly. "Now they want to talk." Elias remained silent. "We are prepared to negotiate," the counselor said. "Terms can be discussed, reparations." "No," Elias said calmly. The single word cut through the transmission like a blade. The counselor faltered slightly. "You misunderstand. Continued conflict will only lead to—" "No," Elias repeated. This time, there was no room for interpretation. "You're not offering peace," he said. "You're offering survival." The counselor's expression tightened. "There is a difference," Elias continued, "and you lost the right to choose between them 20 years ago." Silence filled the connection. "You would risk everything for revenge?" the counselor asked finally. Elias' eyes hardened. "This isn't revenge," he said. "It's correction." The transmission ended abruptly. Mara exhaled slowly. "That was your chance." "No," Elias said. "That was theirs." He turned back to the holographic map. The fractures were spreading faster now. Systems disconnecting. Fleets withdrawing. Leaders panicking. "They're collapsing," Mara said. Elias nodded. "Yes," he said quietly. "But collapse isn't the end." He zoomed out further, beyond coalition space, beyond known territories. There, at the very edge of detectable space, a faint signal pulsed. Unfamiliar. Unidentified. Watching. Mara noticed it too. "What is that?" she asked. Elias stared at it for a long moment. Then slowly, "I don't know," he admitted. And that was worse than anything else. Because for the first time since humanity returned, there was something in the galaxy they hadn't planned for. Something that hadn't revealed itself. Something that hadn't reacted. It had simply waited. Behind them, the wounded struggled to survive. Ahead of them, an empire was falling apart. And beyond it all, something else was beginning to move. And this time, humanity might not be the most dangerous thing in the dark. Collapse didn't come with a single explosion. It came in pieces. Slow, relentless, inevitable. Across what remained of the Velkari coalition, systems began to disconnect, not by force, but by choice. Entire civilizations severed ties, refusing to stand beside a leadership that had lied, manipulated, and sacrificed an entire species for control. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was betrayal turning inward. On the central world of the coalition, Velkara Prime, the High Council chamber, once a place of absolute authority, had become a war zone of voices. "We cannot maintain control," one counselor shouted, slamming his hand against the glowing interface. "Outer systems are declaring independence faster than we can respond." "Then respond with force," another snapped. "We still have fleets." "Fleets that no longer trust us," a third interrupted. "Command chains are breaking down, orders are being ignored." The chamber erupted into chaos. For decades, the coalition had ruled through unity and fear, presenting itself as an unbreakable force. Now, it was neither. "They did this," the High Counselor said finally, his voice cutting through the noise. "Humanity." Silence followed, because no one could deny it. Not after the broadcasts. Not after the losses. Not after Helios Verge. "They didn't just attack us," another counselor said quietly. "They exposed us." "And now we're bleeding from within," someone else added. The High Counselor straightened, his expression hardening. "Then we stop the bleeding." How came the immediate reply. He hesitated, and in that hesitation, everyone understood the truth. There was no stopping it. Far away, hidden within the shifting void where human fleets moved unseen, Helios stood before a massive projection of coalition space. The once unified structure now looked fractured, systems blinking independently, borders dissolving, alliances crumbling. It's happening faster than projected, Mara said, stepping beside him. We expected resistance. Instead, they're unraveling on their own. Helios nodded slightly. They built their empire on control, he said. Take that away and there's nothing left to hold it together. Mara folded her arms, studying the display. So this is it, she said. We've already won. Helios didn't respond. His gaze lingered on the map, watching as another system disconnected itself from coalition authority. No, he said finally. Winning would have been destroying them. Mara frowned slightly. Then what is this? Helios turned toward her, his expression calm but heavy. This is ending them. Before she could reply, an alert pulsed across the command chamber. Commander, the comm officer called. Incoming transmission, coalition origin, high priority. Mara's eyes narrowed. Another attempt to negotiate. Helios didn't answer. Put it through. The display shifted, revealing the High Council chamber on Velcara Prime. But it looked different now, dimmer, fractured, the once perfect symmetry broken by visible tension. At the center stood the High Counselor. He looked older, weaker. Commander Helios Varn, he began, his voice steady but lacking its former authority. This ends now. Mara scoffed quietly. That's what they said last time. But Helios remained focused. Your actions have destabilized the entire galaxy, the counselor continued. If this continues, there will be nothing left, no order, no structure, only chaos. Then you should have thought of that 20 years ago, Helios replied. A flicker of something passed through the counselor's eyes, regret perhaps, or realization. We are prepared to surrender, he said. The words hung in the air. Even Mara went still. Surrender, she repeated softly. The counselor nodded once. Full dissolution of the coalition, transfer of all remaining assets, fleets, and infrastructure. We will stand down. Silence filled the command chamber. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. This was it. The end of the war. The moment they had been moving toward since the day the sky turned against them. Mara glanced at Helios, searching his expression. This is what we wanted, she said quietly. Helios didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to the display, his eyes locked onto the counselor. You're not surrendering, he said. The counselor stiffened slightly. You're trying to survive, Helios continued. A pause. And I already told you. His voice lowered, colder than before. You lost that choice. Mara's breath caught slightly. Helios, she started, but he raised a hand, stopping her. This isn't about revenge, he said, his gaze never leaving the screen. It's about ensuring this never happens again. And how do you plan to do that? The counselor asked. Helios answered without hesitation. By taking everything. The command was given. Instant. Absolute. Across coalition space, hidden human networks activated simultaneously. Systems were overridden, control protocols rewritten. Fleets, what remained of them, fell under new command structures before their crews even realized what was happening. Not destruction. Assimilation. Planetary defense grids shifted allegiance. Communication arrays rerouted. Data cores unlocked and absorbed into human control systems. It wasn't an attack. It was a takeover. Back on Velcara Prime, alarms erupted across the council chamber. What's happening? One counselor shouted. They're inside our systems, another yelled. We've lost control. The High Counselor stared at the collapsing interfaces, his expression hollow. They're not destroying us, he said quietly. No, Helios replied through the fatting transmission. We're making sure you can never do this again. The connection cut. On the human command deck, Mara watched the transformation unfold in real time. System after system shifting. Power changing hands. An empire dissolving. "It's over," she whispered. Helios stood beside her, silent. Then slowly, he shook his head. "No," he said. Mara looked at him, confused. "What do you mean, the coalition is finished?" Helios stepped forward, expanding the map beyond former coalition borders. Out there, in the darkness beyond known space, the signal was still there. Stronger now. Clearer. Watching. "This was never the end," he said quietly. Mara followed his gaze. For the first time since humanity had risen again, uncertainty crept into her expression. "What is that?" she asked. Helios didn't answer immediately. Because whatever it was, it hadn't tried to stop them. It hadn't tried to communicate. It had simply waited. And now, as the last pieces of the coalition fell into human hands, it began to move. Helios' expression hardened. "Something that didn't care about the coalition," he said finally. "Or us." Behind them, an empire had just collapsed. Ahead of them, something far worse was waking up. And this time, there would be no history to learn from. The war ended without a final battle. No last stand, no decisive explosion. Just silence spreading across the galaxy. Where the Velkari coalition once ruled, something new now existed, not chaos, not freedom, but structure. Controlled, calculated, quiet. Humanity didn't celebrate their victory. There were no parades, no declarations. Only rebuilding. Across former coalition systems, human oversight replaced fractured leadership. Defense grids were recalibrated, trade routes restored. Entire worlds stabilized before they could descend into collapse. To the outside observer, it almost looked merciful. But it wasn't mercy. It was control. On the reconstructed capital world of Velkara Prime, Mara stood at the edge of a high observation platform, staring out over a skyline that was slowly coming back to life. Ships moved in organized patterns above the atmosphere. Infrastructure pulsed with renewed energy. "They're adapting faster than expected," she said quietly. Behind her, Helios approached, his footsteps calm and measured. "They don't have a choice," he replied. Mara glanced back at him. "Do they ever?" Helios didn't answer. That question lingered longer than either of them expected. For weeks, humanity had worked tirelessly, not to rebuild the old coalition, but to reshape what replaced it. Systems were no longer governed by trust or alliances. They were governed by certainty. Every network monitored. Every fleet coordinated. Every variable controlled. "We've stabilized 83% of former coalition territory," Mara continued, pulling up a data stream. "Remaining regions are falling in line." "Resistance?" Helios asked. "Minimal," she said. "Most systems accepted it." That was the unsettling part. They didn't fight back. They didn't resist. Because they had seen what happened when they did. Mara closed the display slowly. "We've done it," she said. "We survived, we took everything back." Helios stepped beside her, looking out over the horizon. "No," he said quietly. "We didn't take it back." Mara frowned slightly. "Then what did we do?" Helios didn't look at her when he answered. "We replaced it." The weight of that realization settled between them. This wasn't the same humanity that had once fought for survival beside allies. This was something else. Something stronger. Something colder. And something far more dangerous. Before Mara could respond, a sharp alert cut through the calm. "Commander," the comm officer's voice echoed urgently. "We're detecting a signal, long-range, unknown origin." Mara's expression shifted instantly. "Is it coalition?" "No," came the reply. "It's nothing we recognize." Helios turned, his focus sharpening. "Display it." The central holographic array activated, projecting a faint pulse of energy at the far edge of known space. The same signal. But now, it was stronger, clearer, closer. It's been there this whole time, Mara said, her voice low. Watching. Helios stepped forward, analyzing the data. Not just watching, he said. Waiting. The signal pulsed again. This time it changed. Expanding. Multiplying. What is it doing? Mara asked. Before Helios could answer, new readings flooded the system. Multiple points of origin. Dozens. Then hundreds. Spreading outward like a wave. They're not signals, the comm officer said, panic rising in his voice. They're objects. The room went still. Ships, Mara asked. No, the officer replied. At least not like anything we've seen. The projections sharpened, revealing vague silhouettes, massive, shifting forms that didn't match any known design or structure. They moved without detectable propulsion, their energy signatures fluctuating in ways that defied every known law. They didn't respond to the coalition, Mara said slowly. They didn't respond to us. Helios' gaze hardened. Because we weren't the threat, he said. A silence fell over the chamber. Heavy, unavoidable. For all their preparation, all their evolution, all their control. They had been fighting the wrong war. They're entering known space, the comm officer reported. Estimated contact within days. Mara turned to Helios, something unfamiliar flickering in her eyes. Not fear, but uncertainty. What do we do? She asked. For the first time in a long time. Helios didn't answer immediately. He stared at the approaching wave, at the unknown force moving toward everything humanity had just built. Everything they had taken. Everything they had become. Then slowly he spoke. We do what we've always done, he said. Mara waited. Helios turned toward the command crew, his voice steady once more. We adapt. The room shifted instantly, fear replaced by focus, uncertainty replaced by purpose. Orders began to move through the system, fleets repositioned, defenses recalculated. Humanity moved. Not as survivors. Not as victims. But as something new. Something the galaxy had never seen before. As the unknown force crossed into the outer edges of former coalition space, their presence distorted the stars themselves, light bending unnaturally around their forms, as if reality struggled to contain them. They're not slowing down, Mara said. Helios nodded. Good, he replied. She looked at him sharply. Good. His expression didn't change. We've been preparing for enemies we understand, he said. A pause. Now we'll learn something new. Mara studied him for a moment. Then slowly, she smiled, not with confidence, but with acceptance, because whatever was coming, there was no running from it. Beyond the edges of known space, the first of the unknown entities fully emerged, vast, silent, and impossibly ancient. They didn't signal. They didn't warn. They simply arrived. And for the first time since humanity returned. The galaxy held its breath. Because the species that had just taken control of everything was about to be tested by something that had never lost anything at all. Helios watched as the stars themselves seemed to shift. And deep down, beneath the control, beneath the strategy, beneath everything humanity had become, he felt it. Not fear, not doubt, but something far more dangerous. Anticipation. Because this time, they weren't fighting to survive. They weren't fighting for revenge. They were fighting to prove something. To themselves, to the galaxy, and to whatever was coming. That humanity was no longer the weakest species in the stars. But whether they were strong enough to face what came next, that was a question even Helios Varn couldn't answer. And as the first contact drew closer, the future of the galaxy balanced on a single, terrifying truth.